what is your mission? Because you have one, and you have one in terms of the what you would like to bring to the world of equestrians. So, what is it?
Rider wellness for everyone, prioritizing themselves in combination with their horses.
Wellness. Let's talk about that word. Let's talk about the words fitness and wellness, because I think we need some defining terms there. It's not just a subset of Instagram that shows up on your For You page. It's not just lunges and getting your heart rate into a certain zone. So, how do you think about fitness in a sophisticated manner?
In a sophisticated manner. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
more than lunges and crunches, and I know because I've heard you say it.
It's literally those two. I don't know why it just seems
That's it.
to stick with me, but it's
Podcast is over.
right, right. But one, in the lunges and crunches, the idea that a rider needs a strong leg and a strong core, those things are paramount in the conversation that we have. So for me, I stumbled on those two because those are the two main things that riders either need assistance with and or come to me for. So when it comes to more than lunges and crunches, it's more powerful that we talk about the entire picture. And being raised in a family that was about or is about wellness overall, your mentality, your physicality, and how those two come together and they connect with everything else around us and inside of us. For me, when it came to the time for me to do my own professional work, this is where I felt I would speak the most comfortable, and also with the most history and experience, right? So I'm not bringing to anyone something that I just read in a book only. I'm not just bringing that aspect, but more of what have I lived, what have I studied, and what have I seen historically that brings that to the forefront for our culture. And right now, rider wellness is far from a thing. And we're going into the version and component of rider fitness and just putting those two words together. And oftentimes, there's a major component that's missing, and it is the entire rider. Similar to how we talk about and how we study and research the horse, we don't have that same research on the understanding and components of what it takes for a rider to influence their horse properly and most effectively.
This is such an interesting thing that I've thought about myself, and I'm curious to get your thoughts here. Do you think that equestrians have a difficult time recognizing the importance of considering themselves as athletes? Or do you think that they have a difficult time implementing the components of what an athletic lifestyle is? Is it the belief or is it the implementation?
It has to be both. Here's why. Culture is influenced by the things that we do. And in order for us to believe something, as they say, when you get to the point of I am something, it has become a habit. It's become something that you consistently or even historically have done. So I am an equestrian. I am a human. I am a rider. I am a fitness professional. I am a performance coach. Those things are very easy to roll off the tongue because I live components of that. So when it comes to, and I would also put myself in the I am an athlete. I do not compete for ribbons and other things, or should I say, in general, I don't compete in that capacity, but I do take the steps necessary to make sure that my athleticism is incorporated with that so that I feel confident in that statement. So for me, and I know oftentimes on the podcast, this is stuff that people really enjoy, but I'm going to speak from the heart and say, I don't believe that every human is an athlete. I believe that there are components of things that people do, and statistics and culture and habits that dictate you being athletic, increasing your athleticism, and also believing that you're an athlete. And so if we're going to take top names from other sports, Serena Williams, LeBron James,
Simone Biles.
Simone Biles. I'm trying to name somebody that's not black. But
Simone is my favorite, so I have to throw her in there.
okay, gotcha. But just in general, those are just, let's just say those are top athletes at their crafts. They practice and they use the components necessary to improve their skill set and the strength that it takes to be better at that. And so those are the components that I feel are growing in our sport, but not to the level that I feel lets everyone claim that I ride a horse, I'm automatically athletic. So other components that add to athleticism are coordination, body awareness, understanding, and also cross training, the mental and the physical side of it. Now, you don't have to be at that top level to be an athlete. There are high school, elementary school athletes, but what we often find, even with those smaller demographics, is that they too train, they too work on those things, and they too are focused on the smallest ways to improve that. So it could be the idea of a equestrian performance coach like myself and a rider performance coach coming together, which typically happens, and them saying, I want to see her hip movement increase in this transition, i.e. dressage. I need you to focus on that during this time. Or I need to see more lateral flexibility for polo when they're going into a swing, a backswing, or in just different things like that. But the better the skill coach is and the better the performance coach, those two people can come together and help the athlete literally improve upon the things that they need help with. And all of our other sports actually are doing it. So for me, that's the component that I want to bring, and wellness is the first portion of that major change going forward.
That is not a setup or a prototype that you see frequently in excuse me, in equestrian sports, where the athletic trainer, the physical trainer, the performance coach like yourself is working in tandem with the, as you said, skill coach. I think you said.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are.
What we think of as like my trainer at the barn, blah blah blah. You know, the person who is both training the horse and training myself. That person working in tandem with somebody like yourself, who's actually working with the rider's body, identifying weaknesses, identifying strengths, and looking at the entire picture. And when you say, I've played other sports, I know you have as well, that happens very frequently in other sports. Almost all the time.
And those sports are a lot younger than ours. They've been around a lot less time than ours. So those are the components that I am currently making that change upon, which is how do we improve ourselves just a little bit to the point where it compounds over time. And that time could be 3 months in the program, 6 months, 12 months, and 12 years. So it's the smallest things that you can do now that have the biggest effect going forward, i.e. increasing hip mobility for a better canter, i.e. improving better lower spinal mobility or fluidity for easier walking. So it's just little things, or just it could be barn chores. I have clients who come to me who just, look, it's becoming taxing. I've had an injury in the past. How do I continue to do this? Because I love my horses, but I can't, one, afford to hire someone else just to do the simple barn chore things that I know how to do myself. And two, I would just want to continue to be there for my horses. How can you help me in that case? And we can do that. So all the way from a trail rider to the top Olympic level, those are easily transferable among things.
How has that been received in your experience so far? So if you say, I want to come in and I want to be a part of the picture here, or a rider says, this is my performance coach, I want him to come to the barn and work alongside you. Or I know you've gone to shows and you've gone to clinics and you've led, riders through warm-ups and all of that sort of thing. Are you the exception or are you the rule?
Let me have you describe the two definitions to you, and then I can better make sure that I'm explaining the answer properly.
Sure. I suppose what I'm saying is, when you are in that situation, is it like, oh, we have a fitness guy here, interesting, that's rare? Or is it like, oh, finally, someone's doing this? Or is it somewhere in between?
It's all across the spectrum. It's even before what you said, like fitness. What? For us? That's a thing?
Yeah.
All the way to, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Wow, I'm so glad that I met someone like you. And then some of those people take advantage of that. Or should I say, take the opportunity that was just presented amongst them. And then there's the others, which is probably the norm, who are just like, I don't understand, or I get the idea. Yes, I should do something, but I don't know where to start. But what I also feel is that in order for it to actually change and become the norm, we have to continue to see it. We have to continue to be around it. And there are so many different silos of the equestrian industry that make it challenging. So, for example, I always like to say this: training at a barn, like fitness training, cross training, let's call it that, at a barn, in your home environment, is uncommon in the US. In the UK, I see it as normal. There are tons of different examples, clinics, all the rest of those things in the UK where that happens. And it's kind of like eventing in the UK is also common. Do you know what I mean? It's similar to that component where here everything is a lot more separated. Now, I can't say the difference is because this, that, or the third, but I also think that we have a different level of disciplines here than they do in the UK. Not better or worse, it's just what I've historically seen. So that might have something to do with it as well.
One of the things that came into my brain when you were talking about why it's important to identify as an athlete. I had someone on this podcast actually, and I can't remember if this part of the conversation truthfully was recorded or not, but we were talking about burnout, and she felt like that was a concern for the horses, but it shouldn't really be a concern for the riders. And she said, really, when you get down to it, the horses are the athletes, not the riders. And I think what she meant is that the concern for strain of going to shows day in and day out, showing in a bunch of classes, that this, I think she was thinking about the strain element, but it really stuck out to me, and I've been sort of like navigating that in my brain, because burnout in riders is real at all levels. And I think back to, I don't know if you've ever read any of James Clear's work. He wrote Atomic Habits, but he talks a lot about identifying as the person that you're trying to embody the habits of. So if I want to become more athletic, I have to immerse myself into the identity of an athlete. If I want to lose weight, I need to immerse myself into the habits that a thin person would have. And by the way, we are going to talk about weight in this conversation because I do want to come back to that.
All right.
That, I think, is something I don't see very commonly, and this is just my experience, but it sounds like it's probably yours as well, is that there overall is a lack of identifying as the athlete. We do a lot to support our horses' bodies. They have chiropractors, they have body workers, they have saddle fitters, they have their veterinarians. I've had Amanda Anderson on this podcast before, and she talks about, one of the biggest elements of saddle fit is the rider's strength and symmetry. And so it's a feedback loop. It's when you have a rider that regards themselves as an athlete and they do the things that an athlete would do, which is recovery, wellness, supporting themselves with nutrition,
self-care,
working out, making sure their body's symmetrical and balanced. That feeds back into the horse's symmetry and balance and wellness and things that the horse finds restorative. Horses need restorative activities just like we do. Sometimes they need to go on a walk just like we do. The two things are not. We can't just think about our fitness and then our horse's fitness. It's a loop.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Are you there?
I'm still here.
There you are. Oh, did I go out?
I heard every word.
Oh, it totally went completely silent for me. Anyway, how do you see when you're talking to a rider, because you're really thinking about the rider portion, how are you thinking about the effect that the rider will have on the horse? Or maybe I have that wrong.
You said, say that last part one more time just so I can respond properly.
Sure. How do you, when you're training a rider and you're coaching a rider, how are you thinking about, how am I going to coach this rider in order to have an effective partnership with their horse? I'm sure people come to you and are not just saying, I just want a six-pack, just have a six-pack. I'm sure that
9% of them don't say that.
Okay, great. We're in the right direction then.
we're in the equestrian space.
So how do you think about that feedback loop between the horse and the rider?
Excuse me. Let's go back for a quick second. I've never said this on a podcast, on air, or whatever it is, but I got into the industry to really help the horses. Think about that. But guess what? I didn't go to school for that. I don't have the background in that. So I can't speak on the things that I don't know, but I do know how I can make a major effect on that. And the effect happens by the prioritization of the person who is asking the horse to do X, Y, and Z. And in order for the horse to respond, or our horses to respond better, more effectively, and efficiently, we must do something ourselves. Because as you've had conversations with Maeve and quite a few other people in general, like you just mentioned with Amanda and Saddle Fit, it makes my job better and more easy when you do these things. You affect the horse's gait, you affect the horse's transitions when you do these things, and they all center around the person who is mounted on that horse. Mm-hmm. So in order for us to be even more caring and loving and a part of that sentient partnership, we must prioritize ourselves with it. And I think I wrote this in an article recently, or it's getting ready to come out soon, something of that sort. But it was the idea that in order for us to truly make change, we must start with ourselves. And in order for us to start with ourselves and have our horses go that extra mile for us, as we always talk about, she was so good, he was so good, X, Y, and Z, they're just amazing. It's like, well, they should be saying that about you too. You know, they're trying to keep you safe, but more than I got your back just because I know you're doing as much as you possibly can. And so I think what also needs to be adjusted in our horse partnership research and studies is to really tap into the true sentient beings that they are and the effects that they have on the rider as well as on people around them. Because as we already know, they feel the mood that we're in before we even get close to them. They know those things. So if we're in an adverse mood, or if we are not feeling confident in something, why do you think the horse doesn't go over that jump? Why do you think the horse stops? It's not just because you didn't put the right aid on at the right time. There's a emotional or an energetic connection that takes place. And so rider wellness goes back into those things. They're like, okay, how can we help to build your confidence in these ways? And as I say with my family often when explaining these horse things, it's like you can't have the mental side strong and not have the physical side strong. You can't have the physical side strong and not have the mental. But guess what? They do influence each other. 100% influence each other. So the more that you are taking the reins on both aspects is the easier and the more you'll notice that your partnership with your horse literally quadruples, if not even more than that. And that could be whether your horses are used in the professional sense, as there are multiple and you have to do what you do. You need to have some sort of connection with them. If you have 12 horses or 13 or 6, or if they're a sponsor's horse, no matter what it is and how they're utilized, that importance of them knowing that you're doing something and them also understanding that is huge in the partnership. So for example, I often ask my clients to just spend time with their horses without doing anything. Don't groom them, just be there. If you're comfortable, go into the stalls with them and just hang out. If you're not, go out into the pasture and just sit there, read a book, go out, just do that aspect, because that's what we need as mammals, for one. And then two, when we're asking them to do something, it makes it so much better for them to understand that there's a difference in this rider than the next person who just mounted and rode me, for whatever the case is. So I hope I answered that question in a longer way, but in a way that is lunges and crunches, mental stability, but also bringing those all together. And that is housed under self-care. And self-care isn't just taking bubble baths and taking time for yourself and me time. See your self-care as we time. I'm doing this because X, Y, and Z. And you know that for a fact yourself. And in your own fitness journey, you don't just exercise just for yourself because you now have 2 kids that you want to see continue to, one, see that as an example, and 2, you want to be stronger physically and also have the stamina to be there over the long term. So it's more than just, I do this only for me. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. The one of the things that I think really stands out to me about fitness and just taking care of your body and prioritizing your health and starting to think about longevity and how am I going to be, this is a lifelong sport. Many people are in this for decades and decades and decades. Yep. And if you're not, that's okay too. You don't want to be one of those riders who, rode for 2 years and then it wrecked your body so badly that you will never do it again. But there is an enormous mental, and this has been studied, this isn't just anecdotally my experience, but there is data on this. There's an enormous link between mental health and exercise. Mm-hmm. That, when you were sort of talking about that, like mammal to mammal connection, it made me sort of, it made me think about, again, like that feedback loop. When I've talked on this podcast before about my kind of a little bit about my own journey with mental health. I've always luckily it hasn't been a humongous struggle for me for an extended period of my life. But I, after my first baby, had pretty shocking postpartum depression. Mm-hmm. Could not exercise my way out of that. That was, it was so far beyond that. It was so chemical. It was so I had never been able to not hard work myself out of something like that. It wasn't like a funk. It wasn't like a moment. It was a crushing reality. It was incredibly self-absorbed. It was incredibly dark. It was incredibly lonely. I, to this day, am maybe at some point I'll do have an actual conversation about what that experience was like, because it was truly unlike anything I've ever experienced in my entire life. But when I started to come out of that, it was around the time that my baby turned 7 months, and it was truly like I woke up one morning and somebody had turned the lights back on.
Wow.
It was so bizarre. It was so instantaneous. And at that point, I didn't know how to get myself back to normal. It was like somebody comes in and turns the lights back on in your brain, but no one's in the room. And you're just like in this white walled room, and you're just like looking around like, okay, like now what? And and actually Dr. Jenny Susser, who I've had on this podcast, has talked to me before about when you're in those dark moments, or you're in those moments of not knowing what to do next, or you're in moments of grief, the best thing that you can do is take care of your body the way that you know how. And so it was like I couldn't exercise my way out of postpartum depression, but when that light switch came back on, the only thing that I already knew how to do, because it was already in my toolbox, was exercise. And it was the first time I had exercised my body in like a loving way. It was not exercise to look a certain way or to perform a certain way. This is going to like make me cry. It was exercise in a way that it was like, this is so that I can continue to live. Like, it was like exercising to live, truly. I'm like, oh.
About to make me cry, because you speaking to my heart. Yeah, seriously, you speaking to my heart and my mission, which is listening. And so many people have a bad rap about fitness, about exercise. And really, if I could change it to Equestrian Movement Academy, I would, but my name isn't Ifa. So my name is Ifa. So, EFA kind of works perfectly. But overall, it's more about movement, and movement isn't.
Oh, now you're back.
Movement isn't about how much I do of something, about why I have to do it, or it's giving the body exactly what it needs. And we have a major industry in the equestrian space that is literally like, listen to the horse. Listen to the horse. What the horse wants to do today is what we're going to do today. And we'll make those habits around the way, and we'll adjust however we need to. But overall, we're going to listen to what our horse is asking. So if he just says we're going for a walk, or she says, yeah, I'll do a couple of laps around, then we're going to do that. But we're not going to overdo it. And so that same thought process needs to be granted to us, as you just mentioned, about movement and care for your body differently than you've ever experienced before. And you're obviously interviewing me, but off the record, we can talk more about how did that really change your perspective going forward about those two words, exercise and fitness?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing, because I think, so often exercise seems like a path to something else. And there's something about that it's something to earn something else. It's something you do to earn a good body. It's something you do to earn respect of people around
Ice cream.
you. It's something you do to earn the food you want to indulge in. And I think that we don't think about exercising our horses that way. We don't think, I'm going to take you on this 30-minute trot set so that you can earn your hay. No one has ever said that to their horse.
No, they don't say it. They don't say it. No, they don't say it. No,
That's
but you got to compete.
like-
You got to compete this weekend. Come on, we got to do a couple more laps around here. I need you to do that, and I need the human to lunge themselves as well. So
Some humans do really need to be lunged more.
But overall, just to add to what you just said, I think the component of why my experience and thought process towards what I do is so vastly different than so many others is I was raised in a family that it wasn't connected to anything. It wasn't. Like, we just go out and we spend time in nature. We go with a hike, and it's not like we want to get our heart rate up today. No, the elevations is going to get your heart rate up. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, we just relax. Sometimes, oh, there's a bench over there. Let's just sit. Wow, that was 3 hours. We just had a talk. Okay, let's keep it moving. And we just it's more of like that aspect that I come from. So I didn't see when I got into the fitness industry this thing I was going to conquer. I was like, okay, this is just an extension of what I've been doing, and
Right.
I need to make it that for the people that I serve.
You've talked to me about your parents, and they're both dancers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once a dancer, always a dancer.
Once a
so
dancer,
yes.
always a dancer.
Yes, correct.
And it's interesting. You've spoken a little bit about kind of how you were raised to see dance and to see movement and to see a bit of joy in your house is very normal, which is such a humongous blessing.
It is.
And I say blessing in a non-religious way. You know, it can be religious or non-religious, but it is such an enormous blessing. And I wonder, you know, as you've done this work, you've worked with lots of different types of people who have come from different types of backgrounds and have different goals and have different realities and have different current family setups and have different time restrictions and have
Yep.
different amounts of resources. For people who do not come from a family who this was normal, it was just how you live, it was just the habits that you have, how much more do they have to overcome? Does it set them behind? Do you notice a mindset that is different than maybe the one that you developed growing up?
Totally. It has to, though. It has to. What I do want to make sure that I say to people is that the difference in someone else is exactly what you should be going towards rather than away from.
Say more
The
on that.
difference in what you see is what you should be going towards. So you shouldn't always find someone that has the exact same situation, scenario, experience just because you'll resonate a little bit more with them. Because sometimes they're only going to keep you at that level that you are most comfortable with. And so for me, it's like, I can't have the conversation about being overweight. No. But I do understand the strategic way, and I have an emotional connection to humans in general to understand and empathize with components of that journey. But I don't need to be the same weight at some point and have lost it for me to be able to figure out how to help you. And I have statistics on me doing those things as well. But the idea is people often want the same exact thing. Well, I want you to ride Western. I want you to be an eventer. I want you to be a this if you're going to work with me. And it's like, but you're stopping your progress just because you're looking for someone else. And he's right here or she's right here. Whoever it is right there in front of you. So for me, I would say, yes, there is a different thought process, and there are certain aspects that will need to be adjusted, changed, and overcome. But I don't ask you to do that overnight. You have to go through the challenging things just like I have to go through the challenging things in other aspects of my life. It doesn't make me any better than anyone else because I've come from a family that had some of these things. There's a lot of things that I didn't come from that I could learn from you in your situation. And I think understanding and learning that with each and every client and individual and group and organization or whatever it is that I work with, it's important to learn that that difference is what's going to make us just enough closer so that we really value what we're looking for.
Not going to, not choosing one person or one method because that looks familiar to me, so I'm comfortable with that.
Right.
But thinking about what do they know that I don't? What perspective do they have that I might not have? That's really growth mindset, kind of in a nutshell.
It is, and it's exactly what you mentioned with James Clear earlier, which is doing small changes and habit stacking to help you get to that I am, right? So if your I am is I haven't come from this, or I don't know how to, take the person that's there trying to help you get there, because that's what's going to help you improve upon that. And that's also what makes us the beauty of being human in a way, which is the differences. And when you learn those things, it brings you so much closer. The idea of rich to poor, right? There's so much that both of them think about each other that they don't even understand. There's so much that they're both going through in different ways, but there's such a connection that's like, wow, if only we have more of these conversations, it could help that. And so that's what I do on a daily basis, coming from a different background and thought process with people who don't look like me and or don't have the same exact initial upbringings as I did. So I value that personally, but it is challenging from time to time, of course, because it's not always easy being different, but it is valuable, and it is something that I continue to learn from, and both sides for my clients.
Talk to me about consistency. Talk to me about the bridge between knowing information. We live in a world where there is so much information. I mean, you pick up this like rectangular little box and you hold it 5 centimeters or 5 inches from your face, and you literally have the world at your fingertips. And that is, it's amazing. It's amazing. And it's a skill to learn to not be paralyzed by that. And then it's another skill to learn how to sort through that information, and yet another skill to learn how to apply that information, and yet another skill to learn how to be consistent in applying the principles. Do you find that consistency is a big hurdle for your clients?
The consistency of staying with the program, or just staying with one thing?
Sticking with the program, sticking with the things that we know that we should do.
Yes and no. Yes, because it still isn't culture yet, right? So let's just go for an example. I ask my riders to warm up before they ride, but I don't make them do that at day one. I don't make them do that at day one. Over time, that's a part of my big cause and reason, is to make sure that we're prioritizing ourselves just enough before we ride. But at the same time, that comes in jump 2 of the 3-jump program. They're like, oh, what's this thing? I see you've met ELA. Welcome. Here's what that's about. This is going to be your rider warm-up now. So now, depending on where that person is in their journey, they either do it at the barn or they just continue practicing it at home. And then in jump 3, they actually start to incorporate it at the barn, at the show, so on and so forth. So it's not about
other people.
let's go into that part. That's another aspect of what I continue to push towards, because I've been to many horse show, and I can only count on one hand, I think maybe 5 times, where I've seen a rider go to the side, hide, and warm up themselves. And for me, I feel saddened by that, because it's sad that they are so different than the culture that they're in, that they don't have the comfort to be able to do this right in front of their teammates, or in public, or right there with your horse, whatever the case is.
Any other sporting event, it would be so weird to not see players warm up. And you go to horse shows and you never see riders warm up.
They are players in a way.
Yeah.
It's a connection, right? So yes, and that's and I think I used to use this analogy often, but then I noticed that it fell on deaf ears. Riders don't typically follow other sports, truly. No, this is all I do. This is what my family did. This is what I'm into. Why would I go to a basketball game? Why would I go to a hockey game? Why would I go to a football game? Why would I go to those at the highest levels? Why would I go to a tennis match? So when I used to give that example, yeah, when you go into the game and they're like, no, bro, no, we don't. And I'm like, okay, that idea went right over their head. So it's like, no, I've never seen a basketball warm up. Like people go to the stadium early to see that, right? Like in baseball, that's something that you literally see even in between certain innings. They still throw a couple balls around, et cetera, et cetera. Tennis, they have the bands out. They're doing their agility work, so on and so forth. So once again, we talked about this before. It's the culture of what we see, what we do, and the statistics of how often we do it. So yes, I do have riders at shows now who are warming up, and they don't have to hide. But now I'm getting emotional. It's really valuable to see and to feel a change that you make in someone's life when you really, really know that you're making a change. And for your riders to send you videos of themselves saying, done with my warm up, or how did I do, or how did it look? And you to be able to smile because you taught someone something that's life changing that they don't have to pay you for the rest of their life. And they can do that. That means everything to me. Yeah. You know, it's not about the money. It's not about all the other things. It's about like, and then how did your ride go? You wouldn't believe I did amazing. And I'm like, no, I would believe because that's kind of what I do. But yeah. But yeah, I'm so proud of you because now you're actually starting to see like, okay, this guy cares, this guy understands, and this guy knows just enough of how to get me to that point and that perspective that I've been looking for and that I'm consistently moving towards. Does that make sense?
I think it comes back to the thing of that we talked about with valuing yourself enough to use the tools that someone else, in this case you, are giving them to actually invest in themselves.
Yeah.
The tools are out there, and it's up to every individual person whether or not they value themselves enough or they have the accountability to utilize those tools. And that is such a catalyst for self-worth and self-pride. Like, for them to send you those videos, like, they're truly, really proud of themselves, and they want you to be proud of them as well. Right. They want you to share in that.
Right.
And I think, I think sometimes there is a real, and I don't think that this is just specific to horse sports or even sports in general. I think that sometimes, to be seen as serious athletes, we really have to tamp down our joy about something. This is something I know you and I agree on a lot. That really has to change because what are we doing with our one short life if we can't express and communally feel joy when we're doing the thing that we love? Like, that is just, I don't know, that just really speaks to me.
Yeah, it's intolerable. We did a post together on Noel Floyd. 7 months, 5, 7, somewhere around there, 7 months ago, about exactly what you just said. And it was like the idea of people not acknowledging me at shows or not saying hi or just not being human, if I would call it that, when someone different is at their show. And I'm not there to just mess around. I'm not there to just take money from people at all. I'm there to really provide a comfort, a value, and a service to people. And it goes a long way to, just like you just said, like understand and value yourself enough to go, okay, he looked like a fitness guy. He must be a fitness guy. I don't know if I want to go over there to him. Maybe if I don't smile and I don't look at him, maybe he will kind of go away and he won't bother me. It's like, I'm going to bring this energy everywhere, and it's important that it's like we said in that post, it's like, I want to be a part of a place where it's not uncomfortable to be different in this space, for one, but also two, of like, how do I bring this together so that we teach people how to do that, because you have to teach people how to do certain things if you want them to do that. And so teaching someone how to be nice, which is what you were pretty much alluding to, like niceties and just caring, is something that we need to see more in our equestrian culture. And I'll just speak on, whatever that specific bubble that I've been in is. And so that's valuable to me in this journey that I'm on, which is just like, whenever you see Ifa or EFA anywhere, just come up and say hi, or just smile and look at me. That's it. You don't even have to say anything. If you want to say hi, you can, but just, but I make it so trivial, but it's tiring when you go home after being the only person in a place and you hardly get a look, or it's really weird. But my mission is bigger than the moment. And so it's not about just how do I feel in this moment. It's like, well, how do we get from here to there? And there are going to be days and moments and opportunities where that happens. That's all. That's how that goes.
I think, it's interesting because what you were just speaking about, there is a part of me that is realizing, I had asked you whether you felt like you identified, that you felt like you worked in the fitness industry or the equestrian industry. Mm-hmm. And one of the I don't know, kind of obstacles of working in the fitness industry, I would guess, this is just an assessment, would be that there's a lot of shame, or there's a lot of judgment in that industry. Like I have to think that there might be, if a bunch of people walked in my house right now and one of them was like this, like very fit, like jacked person, man or woman or whatever, and it was like, that's the fitness trainer and they want to talk to you, I'd be like, oh fuck.
Right.
They're gonna tell me that I'm eating too many carbs for breakfast, and they're gonna tell me that, like, yep. There would be trepidation, because what are they going to pick apart about me that I already have insecurities about? Because that's the thing. Is it comes from, I already have an insecurity. Yep. And I wonder I'm just wondering if in your line of work, if you feel that, if that comes up for you at all, if people bring their insecurities to you and they're like, I know I can do better, but I just if there's just a bit of that hurdle, and how you navigate that with people.
I like to be honest with my clients. That's the first thing. I don't treat them as numbers. I don't see them as that. Every single person I literally know, I speak to. Oftentimes I travel to go and meet them and see them and support them in different ways. But those are I give personal stories and reasons, and it's not just like, oh, this is business and we're just doing that. Like I didn't get into the fitness industry in general for that reason, and I definitely didn't merge myself naturally into this industry to bring, as you were just saying, the continuous fitness industry stereotypes into what we already know we need help with, which is, for example, some top riders are like, I don't even know what to do. And I am the athlete that people look up to. I don't even know what to do. And I'm just like, and I think they're looking at me to go like, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm just like, I feel that. And I'm like right there emotionally with them, rather than like, yeah, you should be better. You're an athlete. No, I see every single person as different on the same spectrum, if that makes sense. And the spectrum being levels of athleticism, levels where we can increase or decrease our fitness, and also how do we take them to the next level from where they are. So as my motto would go, transforming competitors into champions. And I've been told before, I don't know, competitors and champions, that might sound a little bit forward for people. But I always say, but aren't y'all competing with each other anyway? Yeah, but when you say it that way, it just kind of makes me, it's kind of time to call a spade a spade. The spade is, we are competitive with each other. And guess what? If you're not, you should be competitive within yourself. And that within yourself means that 1% better that I always talk about. Compounding on that 1%. So if you can be a slightly bit better if you can be slightly better, excuse me, put my English back out, better than you were yesterday, then you are automatically going to continue to win in the category of becoming a champion. And so while I want riders to prioritize their athleticism, prioritize their wellness, and prioritize their journey to being comfortable calling themselves a champion without a colored ribbon, that's where the progress will take place. Because it's that component, that holistic approach of wellness that helps us to get there, so that it is not only external. Everybody loves a nice shiny thing. Absolutely. Come on, let's be real. But what components do we actually know are really fueling us? And for me, that would be to be around the horse, to ride the horse, to get better, and to say, all right, there's some things that I could get better at here, but I'm still on this journey to X. And I enjoyed the moment that I was in, you know?
Yeah. Talk to me about weight. How do we... No, we're going there.
She said, talk to me about weight, horse weight or saddle weight.
Talk to me about how you navigate the weight conversation. It's talking about body weight has like never been more complicated, because you can't talk about it, but you have to talk about it. And there's some people that only talk about it, and there's some people who are like, don't ever eat or not eat, or eat a certain way or not eat a certain way in order to affect your body weight. You should just eat, you know, whatever you. There's just a wild spectrum of how people view body weight. We did an episode of this podcast talking about specifically about in the equitation and hunter world, there is a very strong diet culture, which is really destructive around young girls. Do you speak to riders about weight? What do those conversations usually feel like if they bring up to you, you know, I'd like to lose... I'm assuming it often goes, I would like to lose a certain number. How do you navigate that? How do you think about that?
For one, the weight loss, those things won't be mentioned on my website. In the equestrian space as a whole, that isn't our major fitness issue. It's not our major fitness issue. So for me, it's something that I don't necessarily market, advertise, or tagline into for those reasons, because losing weight isn't automatically the differentiator or the gain that you'll receive in the saddle. It's just not. I mean, you can still be heavier than you would like to, and still work on your body composition, and still work on other aspects of your fitness and wellness game, and then that number continues to chip away. But there's so many different ways to go about that. So to answer that question in totality, it is when a rider comes to me and says, I have X, I want Y, I'd like to do Z, I go back into the first things that I always ask, which is, how are you sleeping? What's your stress level? Those things. Like, I'm, for one, obviously a guy. So number one, that's already taboo. You don't bring that conversation up. You don't talk about it. You don't guess. You don't. You don't guess weight. You don't. No. There's a component, like you just mentioned, in the eq world, in our equestrian space, that is highly tied into what people have experienced and how people feel about their riding journey and how well they do as a rider. And for me, I think that I know that that's sad, and I'm saddened that is still a thing to this day, in this day and age in 2023, where I literally have heard trainers say some things where I'm just like, if I ever had a daughter and I heard them say that, oh, we have ourselves a problem. We have ourselves a problem. So it is those components that are tough to navigate. But number one, I ask them about their stress levels. We can't go any further with your weight if I'm not on the same page with you about your stress levels. That's automatically going to dictate that. You not eating a certain amount of calories, you going into calorie surplus or deficit, means nothing to your cortisol levels. when those are blaring and spiked and uncontrollable. So let's get you some stress mitigation techniques. Let's focus on proper breathing. Let's focus on a lot of those different things, because believe it or not, there's a lot more that goes into it than just subtracting calories. A lot more. So to keep it simple, those are the first two things that I would say I talk to riders about. Yes, I have had riders lose weight in my program, but it is never a major focus of that. And so for me, as posture, position, and body composition are extremely important in the saddle and in performance, I think it's also important to understand how much weight your horse can really handle. If your horse can handle a heavier rider, okay, but if you're riding a pony and it shouldn't be at that weight, then that's a different story. But there are ways around that, and everybody doesn't come in fun size package like I do. So, I can't, like I said to you earlier in this conversation, I can't act as if I've had that experience, and I don't. Yeah. So understanding my lane and playing my role properly is something that I truly believe that we as an industry need more help with, and we also need to make sure that we're doing that ourselves. So for me, I will never get into the conversation of prescribing someone a meal plan, because I did not go to school for that. I did not. Yeah. So I can't get into that. Can I give recommendations? Can I say, hey, this is what I do? Can I go around that way? Can I send recipes of things that I love and enjoy? Absolutely. But more than anything, this is the components that I do. And it's just as your horse has a team, a chiropractor, a body worker, a dentist, a vet, so on and so on, so do we. So it's time to prioritize those aspects and find the budgeting that works best for you, whether that's you get to see that person once a year for your budget, or you get to see them once a quarter or monthly like my own program. That's a different story, but it has to be structured and understood so that we know who we're speaking to and the team that we're building ourselves around, just as I mentioned with the skills trainer and the performance trainer like myself, or performance coach.
I'm going to ask you a hard question. Have you observed that there is a correlation between lower body weight and better performance in riders?
No. Not a hard question at all. Have I noticed that a lighter rider performs better than a heavier one?
Yeah. Is there something about the way that they function better?
No.
Because we know that they're placed higher. We know that in hunters and in equitation, they're given higher placings. We know it.
But that's because of systematic legal biases. It's legal to be biased in those ways in our sport culture.
Say more
They don't get fined for this girl clearly should have won that because her equitation was better than the other, but she just didn't get it because she was bigger. They can't be fined for that. So until that culture changes, when it actually isn't about how rail thin can you be as an adult or as a child, because that's still a thing as well. That's what has to change. So to answer the question again, no. I don't feel as if, because if we go into this, I'll ask you, what would be the weight range that would be acceptable?
There's no way to determine that.
That's my point. That's exactly my point. So I think personally, if that was going to be in something incorporated, then they need to know the breeds and the understanding of the horse and how much weight that they can handle. And then there needs to be a percentage in which you fit into that. That's the only way that could realistically work in this space, because it's about horse welfare first, and then that continues through the other aspects. But that's what my perspective on how it could improve would be, and how properly to go about it, which is a range so that we're not being subjective to the idea of what someone should look like and be. Does that answer the question?
I like that. Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely.
She said, I like that answer. I'm glad you like it, but I hope it
Well,
answered.
it's not about look, the truth is not predicated on my personal opinion. That me liking,
Got it.
I don't like that we have UFO Congress hearings, but me liking that has nothing to do with whether or not it's true.
That's very true. That's very true. No, I just wanted to make sure I was clear in my
I wanted to
example.
say you gave a really complete answer.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you.
I want to talk about rest. This is a difficult one for me. This is a difficult one for me to wrap my head around. And you talked a little bit about it earlier when you mentioned that you prescribe to your clients go to the barn and spend time with your horse and do nothing with them. Mm-hmm. These restorative activities that are, I'm presuming, are categorized under rest. What makes rest productive? What kind of rest do we need to be thinking about? Is it laying in bed, watching Netflix, or watching this podcast? Is it doing yoga? Is it meditating? What makes rest work for us?
Okay. If you don't mind, I could ask you a couple follow-up rapid fire questions just so that you could play the typical response that I get, and your answer would just be
I love getting interviewed back on this podcast. It's great. It's really I really do. It's cool.
It's more of like I want you to speak for the voice that people are listening with, if that makes sense. And
so you want me to give my personal answers to these questions?
Yep. Just how often do you think it's important for your horse to have rest throughout the week? Horses.
2 to 3 days off.
Okay, great. Now, if you were to override that, what would happen to your horses?
He would be crippled. Like, he would be lame.
Okay.
He would break down over time. And also, he would get really, really angry about doing his job.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it would have a physical and an emotional connection, correct? So those two things answer that question completely. I want riders to understand that whatever question you have about the proper doings with your horse is the same thing that you should be implementing yourself. We put them on the ultimate pedestal, so why not just put ourselves at, let's just say once again, 1% today. So if they get a dentist appointment where they get shoed every month and you only get new shoes every 2 years, okay, now it's every year. If they get 2 to 3 days of rest per week and you get 0, okay, it's time to give yourself 1 hour. Self-care Sundays. Come join me. Or half an hour, actually. It's time to do that small component because, to go into the science behind it, the recovery of it is human lameness, which is mental and physical, which is your body breaks down. It does not operate the same way that it should optimally. And most people don't understand what optimal is. Optimal is, for example, and I'm also working on this journey myself, optimal is the ability to think clearly, to physically not have aches and pains for no reason, and to also feel and understand that you have a certain strength that means everything to the journey that you're looking forward. So those are ways that you can be optimal. It is mental stability, it is mental clarity, it is mental strength in so many ways. Those are the things that you regain when you have or prioritize recovery, whether that's a small amount of time or a larger amount of time. And that will depend on the person, the schedule, the lifestyle, all of those things that they experience in that capacity. Does that make sense there?
It does. And my follow-up question to that is, I think we might have some people who are listening who are thinking to themselves, I feel exhausted all the time. How could I ever possibly add a workout program or workouts to my week? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I think I know what you're going to say.
Let me do my thing. Let me do my thing. Let me do my thing. Okay, so number one is that's my job. That's my job, is to help figure it out and get it into your schedule. It's not your job. That's why you hire a coach for that, right? You hire someone to take care of certain aspects of your finances because that's their job. You don't then go into QuickBooks or whatever app that you might be using and say, okay, I'm gonna start moving some things around in here. I want to invest in this company here just for the heck of it. They're like, that's a bad idea. So it's those aspects, and it's same thing with your horse care team. You don't start most good clients don't start overriding what the professional is saying in this capacity just because they think they might know it. It's like, no, you understand how to do that well, and that's why I'm paying you for it. So to answer that question on those who are like, I'm exhausted all the time, there's this, that, and the third, let's have a conversation. And what we'll talk about in that conversation is what's going on in your life, what's your stress level, what's your determination level, and what's your real, and I hate to go back into the Simon Sinek why, what's your why? Because it's oftentimes people like to give you a reason that they think you want to hear. I don't want to hear my answer. I want to hear your answer. And it could be as simple and as clear as, I want to be able to do this longer. Okay, my response, what's longer? Well, I'm 50 now and I want to be able to do this until I'm 80. Cool, another 30 years at least. I can definitely do that. Here's how. So in the program, you have X, Y, and Z. Can you do this component? They may say, ooh, that might be a lot. Okay. We'll reduce that for now, and then we'll work up to that when the due time is. So in my program, we have 3 different months called jumps that we work through different components and pillars. And then there's always the continuation aspect. So after 3 months, it goes 6, then 9, then 12, and so on. And people do tend to do that because it's a connection with the person and understanding the coaching that comes along with this person is constructing things in my life to make it work so that I'm not overdoing it and stressing myself out. Because what I often hear as well in the ec world is like, I start something, I go hard, and then I fall off hard. And I've been through that yo-yo multiple times. Or I find I get injured often. How come this keeps happening to me? It's the thing that the horse did, so on and so forth. It's like, well, that's because we're not doing certain other wellness components to make your body feel closer to optimal. Once again, that's my job. That you have the conversation, you put that ball in someone else's court, and they listen, and they do the things that they need to do to help you get to where you need to be. But it's not carbon copy. We don't just, print it, redo it, and this is supposed to work for everybody. No, it's customized in a lot of different ways. So while there'll be, opportunities and time frames for people who have more time and or less time, that adjustment is where the necessary tools come in to say, I know how to get you from here to there. Let's take it from this perspective all the way to the next perspective.
Essentially finding ways for this to become systematic in people's lives, just like the example that I give of brushing your teeth. You don't always really want to do it. At the end of the day, you're just like, I'd rather just get in bed. But it's just part of your day. It's just
right.
part of your life. That having that tool in your toolbox is so valuable. And it's valuable from a variety of perspectives, not the least of which is it is a mental health tool. To have all of these, have this knowledge where you know what you can talk about rest, you know what's restorative for you, you can talk about fitness, what works for you, you can all of these different things, how to connect to your horse, you know what that can provide for you. These are all tools that, if we're thinking of ourselves as athletes and we have an athlete's mindset, finding ways. Someone once sent me this documentary. It was a CrossFit documentary, and I think it was about like Annie Thorisdottir, someone like
Love
one
her.
of the Icelandic CrossFit athletes.
Yeah.
And
chiseled.
Oh man.
Yeah,
she's incredible.
Yeah.
But she talked about, I'll have to check this before this podcast comes out because I think it was her. She talked about how the biggest thing about being a an elite CrossFit athlete isn't really the workouts, it's actually the recovery. It's being able to shorten your recovery time in order to progressively overload yourself and work out the next day and be able to withstand that kind of athletic load. And it's just, it really underlines the importance of, if we are going to be athletes, if we're going to think about how athletes live, if we're going to embody the identity of being an elite athlete, this is one of the fittest people on the planet saying it's about recovery.
Yeah. But that
really
same question goes back to, how many days off does your horse get in between shows and in between this and that? You send them back, and it's just but then, as you had a conversation just recently on the podcast about burnout and overdoing it and how come there isn't really a season, all of those different things are aspects of things that need to be adjusted in our horse culture. And now that's challenging because there's a monetary gain to having more and more horse shows around. But at the same time, that is technically the goal of the performance coach and the skills coach. That's our job to say, and for us who think that we're in the only sport that goes through this, just so you are aware, golf goes through this big time. Tennis goes through this big time. Basketball does not. Football doesn't. Baseball has an aspect of it because the season is so long. But there is a slight off season for quite a few months. But even in that time, some guys go and play in a different place, or girls play in a different place. So in our case with golf tournaments, those are popping up everywhere. And there's money and there's things and there's tennis events and you got to be there. And so we're not the only sport going through the idea of how much is too much, but the idea and the perspective of the coach and the team that sets them up for success is, how do we make sure that we are not overdoing ourselves so that we have enough in the tank so that we can be our best, so we don't have a rail, so we don't have a missed pattern, because I'm on the English and Western side. I mean, all of those different things. We don't miss the ball in polo. I mean, just the slightest little things that make the biggest adjustments are huge. So for me, it's for me, I track and I test this data. You know, there are fitness trackers. I have my own. I think we talked about it at one point as well.
What fitness tracker do you like? Do you like any of the wearables?
I have a wearable. Yeah, I'm a Whoop guy right now, mainly because I didn't want a screen. I didn't want to have notifications on my wrist at all time, and I also wanted to see actual metrics that some other watches couldn't produce. And I think that I'll be continuously going forward with that in the future. But then again, I always believe in testing something before I give it completely to my clients. So if I convert to something else, guess what? I'll be wearing it or using it first. And then I'll be able to tell you, okay, yeah, I like it, or here's how we're going to use it. So as for example, because I don't like giving free advertisement all the time, but for example, we'll look at one or two components and figure out how to better improve upon that. It has to be actionable, and it cannot be overwhelming for someone in a busy lifestyle or in a busy time. So, you know, seasonally, let's say in eventing, there's different aspects of the year that it gets kind of busy, and it's more important. Okay, cool. During this time, I want to make sure that this doesn't drop below 2% in that time frame. Okay, we got to make sure your heart rate variable stays at this level during this time, even though your stress levels are going to go up, so on and so forth. But even if I'm talking, you know, to a certain level of athlete, we can still dial that all the way back to saying, I want you to track that you did your mindfulness 4 days or 6 times out of the month for this first jump. And then next one, once we hit that milestone, let's go into the next thing. That could be stretching for a certain amount of time a day. It could be doing your self-care routine and marking that down in your notebook or in your app, whatever it is. But it's like, that's where I say that the levels of coaching adjust to where the person is in their lifestyle and in their profession, because everybody isn't a professional rider. So everyone doesn't need all the data. But guess what? More data is helpful to then know what you can improve on and what's the most important thing in that moment. So that's where recovery is extremely important. And how do you track that if someone's giving you a perceived exertion rate. I did a 7 this week. Yeah, let me see the data. Thank you. Yep. Share that. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah. All I can think about is I bet your HRV is so much better than mine.
I don't know. I'm actually in the, and like I said, I believe in being transparent. My job and goal is to get in the bed earlier. I tend to work
me too.
late. I like writing articles. I like doing those type of things. So I tend to have a database of stuff that's just kind of ready to go at certain times, and I should be sleeping instead. That's me. But I do know that I can track that when that goes down for the week and is lower than what I want it to. Okay, it's time to get back on the ball here. So no, I'm not perfect in that case. I think I'm at like a 70, 73, maybe something like that, but it's not. It is okay.
But
Well,
men are always higher.
Let me just
men
make
are
sure.
about 10 points higher than women.
Let me just make sure I preface this. I also do not have 2 kids and a husband. Okay, so let's make sure that we're leveling the playing field here. I'm
gotta see
focusing
what
on
mine
myself
is
and
right
my business, but
I appreciate that.
but it's not me just giving empty kudos. It's a reality, right? You have a different. There's a component. There are multiple components in your brain that are emotionally and physically wired different than mine are at this stage in mine. So we can't put ourselves on the same playing field, male or female, because you have a completely different perspective on things and your daily habits are completely different than mine because you're caring for more than one individual. Yeah, I mean, I got a business, so that's a baby, but, it's not the same. It does not cry the same way that a child, or does not ask of me the same amount of time. So it's just different. But yes, it probably, our numbers probably are different, but you probably have a lot of other things that are like, okay, you're doing real good.
I'm working on it. I am also on the in the camp of trying to get to bed earlier. That is a big one for me because I've started to track my sleep, and I definitely noticed that my sleep is so much better if I go to bed, even if I sleep later in the morning. No, it's about that, like, it's about 10 p.m. to midnight. Like, that's where like the money is for me. Anyway,
To be asleep. Got it.
That's like where I get my best quality, most restorative sleep.
According to sleep scientists, they say that even more important than anything else, even if you do get into bed late, is to wake up at the same time.
Wake up at the same time, and that is hard.
Yep. So for me, I'm up at 5. Yeah. Only if I really feel like I'm dragging here will I extend it a little bit, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, every once in a while, 30. I did one of those last week, unfortunately. But I get up and I get to my workout, which is 25 to 30 minutes roughly, and then I'm on the computer ready to go, email, this, that, the third projects, responding to different things, pushing certain categories forward for the next few hours before it's time to get on the road, so on and so forth, to take care of the first clients of the day. So that's my schedule at the current moment. Yeah. That probably won't be the same in 6 months, but guess what? I'm going to be up at 5, roughly. Yep. So that is important, and I took that to heart. I forget the sleep doctor's name, but it will come to me at some point soon.
Is he the one that wrote Why We Sleep?
No, but that book is always by my bedside. Always.
But I've heard it's really good.
It's amazing. And here's some of the interesting facts that he talked about that changed my life. One being, I used to feel like I always got what's it called? Highway hypnosis. Yes, highway hypnosis. Like, you get tired on driving. I typically drive 2 hours a day to get to, work and clients and such. So that was a part of my norm. And he mentioned that most of the accidents that take place on the road happen for sleep-deprived people. And that's been statistically proven. And so he was just like, even if you could get into bed 5-10 minutes earlier, like tiny things, you couldn't even fall asleep in 5 minutes, but you're in the bed rather than like, okay, I'll get to it. He says that can help. And I physically have noticed that I don't have that same issue at the end of the night or at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day when traveling, just in that small aspect. So for us who are traveling to shows and have that horse show hangover, Lord, the horse show hangover is real. It is important to figure out ways, and that's also kind of a component of what I do. Can somebody else drive for a half hour and you take a quick nap, yeah, but it's going to hit. Guess what?
And then
But
all you have to do is say, well, my trainer said so, so like you could, then they can just blame it on you. My coach told me that you have to drive for half an hour.
let these people talk to me. I will set that absolutely straight, because it's about the team atmosphere, right? So
Yeah.
when everybody is taken care of, everybody elevates. So we can't just put the wholeness on one person. Like, well, we got to make sure that she's good. No, you have to make sure that you're good too. And both of you caring about that is what makes it go, okay, I can pick up the slack here. And doesn't that sound like what I talked about earlier with our horses? I feel like I know I can pick up the slack here, or I can do a little bit more here, because I'm having that constant conversation that allows us to go where we want to go and to be who we need to be. Not want to be, need to be. We need to have more sleep. And I don't say more sleep as in we have to get 9 hours, even though my Whoop tells me that. But we do need to just get a little bit better at improving our restorative sleep, so on and so on. And so while I don't want to dork out on some of those things, because the mission is a lot more simple than the analytics that I've talked about today, the most important thing is when we do better for ourselves and our horses in mind, it automatically makes everything better and everyone around us improves. And the way we do that is by changing the culture one moment at a time.
Ifa, in closing, I want to leave people with some actionable items, because I know my audience really appreciates that. Small things. What are 3 small things, simple things, I should say, that listeners, that people can do this week, today, in the next couple of days, to improve their lives incrementally?
Focus on breathing properly. Prioritize cross training. And prioritize self-care. Download my core guide. Just simple things that don't take much for you to improve upon. And one thing with what I just talked about with the core guide would be get the actionable information that lets you know how you can take yourself from day 0, day 50, year 20, whatever it is in your fitness journey or your wellness journey, and grab that, because that's going to help you then say, I didn't know that, or that was reinforced. And isn't that the same reason why we go to clinics? So that's actionable and very simple. And so those all come together in what we're looking to improve upon.
Thank you so much. This has been a really fun chat.
Thank you.
You're such a calming presence. I've really enjoyed chatting with you and getting to know you. It's nice.
Well, thank you. I think it's your energy more than mine. Because those who know me and who are listening are going to go, he definitely brings the energy. So, okay. But maybe some of them will respond.
Easy to talk to, maybe
Great,
I should say.
great. Thank you. I pride myself on being personable and being relatable and as much as I can.
Absolutely. Thank you for what you do for the equestrian space. We need it. Thank you for the work you do, and thank you for the time today.
Thank you.
Oh, beauty.